Today I'm talking about Greeks bearing gifts. This one's kind of tricky to talk about because more than any other episode so far, this episode is directly engaging with what we know, or think we know, about Greek history. In this episode, we actually go to Troy. We see Helen, we see Paris and Menelaus, and yes, we see the horse. And while this episode does do some good things, it also makes you kind of have to face the fact that the Trojan horse is an incredibly implausible, stupid story. And yes, obviously, it's history. But seriously? A horse? Anyway, the episode starts off with Helen, and Helen is having bad dreams. Oh, poor baby. Honestly, bad dreams, that's what triggers this entire episode. Helen, sweetheart, you've been at the center of a war for 10 years, and that war has pretty much destroyed the town in which you are now residing. I think some nightmares are probably par for the course. And this nightmare isn't even anything particularly outrageous. I mean, it's people coming in and attacking her. Nor are we given any sort of indication that, like, Helen's dreams come true. No, it's just a nightmare. Whatever. Apparently, Xena and Helen are like long-lost BFF or something. And so she sends off some servant messenger soldier dude to go find Xena. And wouldn't you know it, at this time, Gabrielle has just been relating to Xena how much she really wants to go to see Troy. And Xena's very, no, Gabrielle, it's a war zone. It's not worth the risk. Xena's kind of a wet blanket. And Gabrielle's like, shucks. But then Xena, off in the distance, sees 3 soldiers attacking a dude. And without any knowledge of who these 3 men are, who the dude is, why potentially there might be 3 against 1, or basically any knowledge of the situation whatsoever, Xena launches herself in and fights off the other 3 guys, and it turns out the one guy is, of course, the soldier messenger servant dude, who relays his message before dying dramatically. So, off to Troy. And wouldn't you know, who do we happen to meet in Troy but Perdiccas? Perdiccas is such a terrible name. Gabrielle's long-lost fiance. Now, at the time, the show made absolutely no indication, as far as I recall, that there was any sort of relationship between these two beyond a very, like, nominal and now we're betrothed kind of thing, because Gabrielle certainly had no problem sailing off into the sunset with Xena. But apparently, Perdiccas is now interesting, because Perdiccas has left the humble life of the farmer and decided to go to Troy based on Gabrielle's stories about Troy and Helen and Paris and whatever, and is now fighting on the side of Troy against the Greeks, who apparently have all decided to forego the city-state system and have all joined forces into one giant conglomerate of a nation, at least according to the terminology employed in this episode. Whatever. Just so we can get this side story out of the way as soon as possible, Gabrielle and Perdiccas, God, that's a stupid name. Those two spend the entire rest of the episode making moony eyes at each other and discussing all sorts of past hijinks that they got up to as kids, and have the inevitable, we're about to die, so let's make out some. We've all been there. Before having one of those awkward not conversations. Well, I want you to know that I know we were both under a lot of stress and it didn't mean anything. Oh no, I agree, it didn't mean anything at all. Well, I'm glad we agree. Me too. Sad puppy face. Sad puppy face. Yeah, I wish I could say I cared, but I don't. To me, the more interesting side of this episode is the whole Trojan War aspect. Call me crazy. And they do some semi-interesting things with Helen. They make it clear that she doesn't actually know Menelaus at all. He's kind of this skeevy old guy. And 2, Paris doesn't even really know her, even though they've been living together for 10 years, and he just kind of wanted to possess her in the first place. I mean, yes, it's the really obvious route to go if you're going to try and add a little dimension to these really old characters, but they tried. And there's this whole theme throughout the episode that Helen is finally going to take charge of her own life, for which I say, yay Helen! That's great! Keep that up! Go there! Do that! Because the show Xena is all about women taking control of their own lives and destinies and not being dependent on other people, but kicking their own asses. Or kicking the asses of others? But then there's this total cop-out, because Helen gets kidnapped again, and is about to be dominated by another man for the rest of her life, and then Xena steps in. And while yes, I guess a woman is stepping up for another woman, Helen just stands there and she just lets Xena win another battle for her. What is that? Xena writers, you couldn't have just done the old standby of giving her a frying pan or some sort of equivalent and letting her bopping the guy on the head to end the fight? Come on! The other thing I like about this episode is that we actually see the whole Trojan horse thing. Now, that's kind of a lot to tackle when your budget is like Xena size. And what we get is, you know, a sizable, maybe 15-foot high wooden horse, except that it's made out of wicker or something similar to wicker. And all I have are these visions of Greek soldiers in like basket weaving class, just making these panels of wicker for their horse and having some sort of like Greek stitch and bitch session as they weave the panels of wicker to make their horse. And honestly, the horse is kind of cute. I mean, it really looks like a giant toy horse. It's really blocky, and it's got this funny little like spiky mohawk of a mane, and it's kind of adorable. But again, the problem is history. Because seriously, who does this? Why is it at all plausible that the Trojans would believe the Greeks would spend hours making this giant horse just as some sort of consolation prize? Hey guys, sorry about that whole laying your town under siege for 10 years. Our bad. Here, have this parting gift as a token of our appreciation. Sorry, later, bye. Because seriously, 1, why? 2, if I were a Trojan and I had been under siege for 10 years and had lost most of my male relatives and friends to the Greek army over the years, I might be pretty pissed off. And if someone gave me a giant horse as a consolation prize, I don't think my first reaction would have been, yay! I think my first reaction probably would have involved some profanity, and then having a celebratory bonfire while I burn the damn thing. Why aren't I in charge of the Trojan War? Things would have made a lot more sense, that's all I'm saying. Anyway, that's not Xena's fault, that's pretty much just the legend as we have it. And if I'm having flashbacks to the Trojan Bunny from Monty Python and the Holy Grail, that's my fault. Ultimately, it is kind of fun to see the Trojan War from Xena's perspective, and from the perspective of Xena the show. And yes, it's silly, but it's Xena the show. What did you expect? The episode ends with Helen and Perdiccas going off together to some new town to start over. And unfortunately, it looks like Perdiccas is gonna come back. Yay. The relationship is so pasted on. And I'm mostly just left wondering if there was ever any sort of classical history teacher who ever tried to bring this episode into the classroom in some sort of incredibly misguided attempt to be the cool classical history teacher. Because had I been in that class, I think my estimation of their scholarly credentials would have been seriously challenged.